The Terry Show continues. Politically oriented, but enthusiastic. Are you feeling the Democratic vibe coming out of Chicago? Chicago! Whether it's bad Leroy Brown coming out of the west side of Chicago was the baddest part of town. And you better beware. Oh, I forget how the lyrics go. Bad Leroy Brown. Well, it is bad Kamala Harris. It is the DNC this week. Wouldn't be a podcast week without celebrating joy, enthusiasm, and all things progressive in Chicago. And I'm excited because that surge of feel-good red, white, and blue celebration, I think America has found its stride in the Democratic Party. And where did this come from? A mere 3 weeks ago, Jim and I were waxing eloquent on, should the old guy retire? Pass the torch. I was in favor of Biden continuing because he got them through the 4 tumultuous years of transitioning from a guy who had to be dragged out of the Oval Office, the guy who's now deemed by the American Association of Presidential Historians as the worst president in American history, the guy who has boxes of United States military secrets in his pool room in Mar-a-Lago, the guy who's dodged conviction until he encountered the New York State prosecutor and now is a convicted 34-count felon, and he's still the top of the Republican ticket. If you don't have a sense of this is a moment, this is a pivotal point in both American and Canadian political history, then I don't think you're paying attention. This is pivotal in a way that I don't think I've sensed for a long time. Maybe I sensed it a bit when Stephen Harper was tossed. And Stephen Harper went on to IDU fame or infamy, depending on your perspective on things political. Some people claim that the far right, the authoritarian, libertarian is actually a good thing because they lament. They believe there's a conspiracy. The World Economic Forum, WEF, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and there are a few other organizations that are globalist elites. And in some regards, that claim is well-founded. It was odd to see jets lining up to take individuals to the WEF in Geneva when Greta Thunberg was there. And that was, an environmental climate message that was passionate, and here were people taking personal jets, and the irony could not escape the camera lens. And I, for one, agree. You got to put your money where your mouth is. If you're going to talk solutions, global solutions, green energy, you better put your money where your mouth is. And maybe there was a way you could have carpooled a jet. If there were 2 or 3 of you coming from wherever you were coming from, could you not carpool a jet? I'm just saying, is it possible? I don't know. Putting your money where your mouth is includes choices of vehicles, choices that we choose in our daily life and habits. Do we recycle, reduce, reuse? Do you thrift? That means going to the thrift store, Salvation Army, and looking for things that you can get reasonably priced. In fact, way below price. In fact, I got maybe 4 or 5 summer shirts at the beginning of the summer for the price of one shirt at a regular price at a regular men's clothing store. Thrifting, it's a way to stretch your dollar. And if everybody's complaining about inflation, what better way than to take up this kind of thing? Used appliances. I never bought a new appliance in my life, and I won't tell you how old I am, until last year. That's how long it took me to get to the place where I said, okay, I think we can do this. That's a lifetime to get to that place. It's not a short game. Unless you're a first-time home buyer and you buy a new build and it comes with all the appliances as part of the package, then maybe I can see starting off that way. Other than that, starting off at the top of the heap is not where most people start, unless you're perhaps Donald Trump and you get a few million from your dad and start off your real estate empire. And depending on your choices subsequent to that, you grow your own wealth a little at a time. If you're I was going to say normal. If you're a regular person, middle class being squeezed. Yeah, I can feel that too. But I do have hope. Hope in political systems, hope in institutions, hope in change. Not radical libertarianism, which is a dog-eat-dog, wild west, go get 'em kind of attitude in politics and in culture and in religion. So all these three combine to where we are now. If you can explain to me how your beliefs about taxation elevate everybody. Remember, a rising tide floats all boats. Yeah, let's explain these things. If you can't, then you got a problem. If you can explain to me how your policies on private schools elevate the game for everybody, I'd like to hear it. As far as I can see, private schools are elitist, and yet that's the way we're going. Privatize education, sell off the public resources, sell off Ontario Hydro, privatize healthcare in Ontario. Give it to the Weston family because they're buddies with Rob Ford. How about privatize long-term care facilities? Do you remember COVID when it hit? Who got hit first? Long-term care facilities. Who owns a lot of them? A lot of them are private. They're not institutions anymore. They are businesses. And when education becomes run as a business, we have a problem. When churches run as a business, we have a problem. When you serve the whims of a CEO, we have a problem. There are so many areas that are problematic at this point in time. We've come out of a global pandemic just a few years ago. Canada came out nearly on top of the heap with policies that most railed against, from masks and the threat that, masks are going to kill you. And we encountered that, my wife and I encountered that conversation and still do. COVID's on a surge right now. If you haven't been reading papers or finding out about Ontario's rates of infection, over 1,500 is the number that I read yesterday in hospital from COVID. Oh, you're going to say, but I thought everybody... No, not everybody was vaccinated. Not everybody bought into the vaccine. Not everybody bought into it's good to keep out of the hospitals because that's where you're going to find secondary infections and you're going to tax the system, so we're going to burn everybody out. Ontario's never recovered from COVID. The Nurses Association, ONA, Ontario Nurses Association, is constantly saying how underfunded, underpaid, and overworked the nurses of Ontario are. There's a shortage of nurses. Doctors, emergency rooms closing, not available for people. Intakes, personal doctors, family doctors, not available. I forget the waiting list in Ontario, but it's several thousand families. It could be over 10,000 families in Ontario without a family physician. I was lucky. Our doctor did retire, and it took us a year to find another family physician. We are the lucky ones. What about those without a family doctor? It's a privilege to get access to a trained medical professional. It is a privilege that should extend to everyone. It shouldn't be on the basis of wealth, where you can afford to hire your own doctor, or you can go shopping for services because you have money. That's not the way Canada's worked, not since Tommy Douglas put public health care and one system for all front and center in the Canadian fabric of our culture and society. There's a vibe going on now that's very similar to this hope and optimism that we all feel should be part of what? The church's message? Shouldn't it be hope and joy? And you got the joy, 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 joy down in your heart? Do you? Or do you have bitterness, victimization, entitlement, the Karen, or whatever the male equivalent, the Chad? Is that the male equivalent of a Karen? People who seem to be screaming rage at a lot of people. And whether that was in Ottawa a few years ago, or whether that was in the January 6th protests. Protest? That's an understatement. I guess I'm falling victim to the repeating of the diminishing of what happened. I saw January 6th. I've got the book with all the testimony and the documents because I want the details. I want it at a granular level. That's where you start to understand and start to put dots like pins on the wall, and you can see what's going on. Donald Trump is a has-been, always was a has-been, never was anything more than a, what do they call it? Some kind of narcissist, whatever the clinical term is. I know George Conway, wife of Kellyanne Conway, is right up there promoting Trump as a mental health disaster. And we should be pitying him in some ways because we've seen the deterioration. Just like the media focused on Joe Biden, slow walking, slow talking Joe, confused Joe. But nobody talked about Trump's mental health decline. I wonder why that was. So I'm a little bothered by that. Picking on Joe? Don't pick on Joe. Don't pick on Kamala. She's going to rake, is that right? Wipe the floor with Trump. Those are my predictions. And in Canada, if you haven't been seeing a lot of questions about Poilievre, you haven't been reading. And if you haven't seen a lot of happy, joy on the Trudeau side of things, you haven't been watching. If you haven't seen the statistics that put Canada at the top of the G7, not behind the U.S., in front of the U.S. on inflation, you haven't been paying attention. Happy, joy, catch the vibe. Surf the wave. 2025 in Canada, November in America. Bye-bye for now.